Ridge Forrester had survived Fashion Week fiascos, corporate betrayals, and the fracturing of every certainty he once believed unbreakable, yet nothing in the glittering, cutthroat world he commanded prepared him for the moment his phone vibrated against the drafting table and an unfamiliar voice from University Hospital announced without preamble, without mercy, that Brooke Logan had been admitted to the emergency room in critical condition, the victim of a fall from Eric's rooftop. In that instant, the atelier's golden evening light became a glare, the muslin draped on mannequins a maze, and the walls that had witnessed decades of Forrester triumphs seemed to close in as he fumbled for keys already in his hand, mind racing through impossible possibilities, breath ragged with a panic he could neither restrain nor deny. Traffic blurred. Street lamps streaked by like accusatory comets while he threaded through Los Angeles toward the trauma ward where surgeons fought to stitch Brooke back to the mortal side of existence. Memories collided, her laughter echoing across gelid champagne flutes at their last gala, her scent of gardenia lingering in backstage corridors, the stubborn lift of her chin when scandal threatened to topple her. The softness of her voice when she whispered his name long after midnight, and Ridge felt each recollection like a blade twisting against his ribs because only hours earlier he had ended their latest, hopeless attempt at peace, convinced that distance might save them both from repeating a cycle of devotion and devastation. Now that distance mocked him as he ran red lights and pleaded with a silent universe that she still had time remaining, that the final scene had not yet faded to black. In the fluorescent corridor outside Trauma 1, he found Donna pacing, cheeks streaked with mascara and shock, hands trembling as she clutched a handbag stained with Brooke's blood where it had pressed against an open wound during the frantic ride from Eric's estate. Her recounting came in broken sobs, a sister's quiet evening on the terrace transformed into nightmare when Brooke, glass of bourbon in hand, spoke of losing Ridge, her words slipping toward despair despite Donna's desperate reassurances. A slip, a misstep, a dizzy sway on stilettos too tall, railing too low, moonlight too indifferent, and then a scream truncated by bone on flagstone, the world tilting as Donna raced down twisting staircases to find Brooke crumpled beside Eric's sculpted rose bushes, consciousness already faltering. Paramedics arrived to the thunder of Eric's security alarms, their quick assessments grim skull fracture likely. Left arm bent at an angle so unnatural that Donna's stomach still lurched at the memory, and then the sirens carved a path through Malibu's coastal night, while Donna pressed gauze to a wound that would not clot and begged Brooke to stay awake. Ridge listened, numb, until the surgical doors swallowed Donna's final syllables and left him staring through tempered glass at a life he had woven so completely with his own that the idea of unraveling it, of it ending tonight, felt like sacrilege. He was ushered to a waiting room whose sterile hush mocked the roaring in his ears. Monitors beeped behind pale curtains, the scent of antiseptic threaded through outdated magazines. And time became viscous, stretching, snapping, reforming, every minute punctuated by images he could not banish. Brooke in an ivory gown stepping onto a Forrester runway as though heaven itself had chosen her as muse. Brooke laughing beside a Parisian fountain, hair whipping in the wind. Brooke crying softly on Christmas Eve when he placed a star atop the tree and turned to find her gazing at him with that infinite, dangerous tenderness that had rewritten both their destinies. A surgeon emerged at last, cap marred with sweat, voice precise yet weighted by caution. Brooke had sustained a severe traumatic brain injury, subdural bleeding now staunched but unpredictable. Intracranial pressure monitored by sensors that whispered data Ridge could not comprehend, and a comminuted fracture of the ulna requiring orthopedic plates. She was alive, in surgery, but the hours ahead would dictate the rest of her life. Ridge thanked him with a strangled whisper, then watched the doctor disappear back into the realm of scalpels and whispered commands, leaving him suspended between hope and dread. As dawn bruised the horizon, Ridge paced the length of the corridor, replaying every harsh word he had hurled during their breakup, each syllable now tasting of ash, his own righteousness revealed as cowardice by the sudden proximity of loss. Steffi arrived breathless, followed by Thomas and Eric, their faces drawn tight with the recognition that tragedy had vaulted beyond the petty arguments of boardrooms, and still the surgical sweet light glowed red, indicating battle ongoing. Donna sat small in a chair, fingers knotted, recounting again and again how she had tried to pull Brooke back from the edge, how Brooke's heel had snagged, how gravity had finished what heartbreak began. Ridge knelt before her, took her shaking hands, and did not speak because no apology could mend the rent in that moment. Hours later the surgeon returned, the bleeding controlled, bones stabilized, Brooke transferred to ICU, coma medically induced to protect fragile nerves. Prognosis uncertain but viable if swelling remained contained, if infection stayed away, if luck, that capricious deity, favored her. Ridge signed consent forms for further scans, his signature wavering for the first time since he was a boy, tracing cursive beneath his father's guidance. At Brooke's bedside, he confronted the stillness of machinery, ventilators hiss, heart monitors relentless tether, for lines dripping measured salvation. Her golden hair, matted with dried blood, framed a face drained of its luminous animation. Yet even in this twilight state she commanded the room, every beep and oath sworn to her indomitable spirit. Ridge whispered promises of new beginnings, of patience, of love untainted by ego, promises meant for ears that might not hear, but that his own soul needed to speak. Day merged into night. The family rotated vigil. Ridge barely left the unit except to confer with neurologists who layered percentages like thin ice over deep water. The media learned only fragments: Forrester matriarch injured in private accident, and speculation churned, but Ridge silenced PR strategists. Only Brooke mattered, breath by breath. When at last swelling began to recede, when EG flickered with cautious optimism, Ridge allowed himself to imagine a future where Brooke opened her eyes, scolded him for stubble, demanded coffee stronger than medical guidelines allowed, and laughed. Oh, that laugh at the absurdity of their indestructible, combustible bond. He drafted designs on a hospital notepad, gowns inspired by resilience, by the architecture of healing. He vowed the first would bear her name. Yet with every upward tick came the knife-edge reality that any setback, clot, fever, seizure could steal her away, and so he kept watch, counting breaths, anchoring her to this world with whispered memories. Aspen skies, Santorini sunsets, the scent of lilies on their wedding day by the lagoon. Donna hovered too, guilt a shadow she could not shake, until Ridge gently reminded her that love sometimes arrives as guardian angel and sometimes as impossible burden. Brooke's choices were Brooke's, and Donna's presence had pivoted catastrophe toward possibility. As the second week dawned, doctors prepared to ease sedation. Ridge stood beside the bed, fingers wrapped around Brooke's unresponsive hand, and when her lashes fluttered against waxen cheeks, he felt the universe tilt back toward grace. Eyes opened unfocused, clouded with pain but opened, and in their blue depths Ridge saw a question, a reaching. He answered with her name, broken by relief, and watched a tear slip from the corner of her eye, a droplet that contained apology and forgiveness and a future too vast for words. The path ahead glimmered with therapy sessions, courtroom battles over corporate control as vultures circled, and personal reckonings none could predict. But in that raw, luminous moment nothing existed except the pulsing truth that Brooke Logan was alive and that Ridge Forrester, chastened and renewed, would guard that heartbeat with every breath he had left, fashioning not gowns but days, not runways but roads, on which they might walk together toward whatever fragile, extraordinary tomorrow awaited beyond the sterile hush of the ICU. Hope Logan had always been a woman torn between loyalty and longing, between dreams carefully built and truths too painful to admit. For months, she had struggled to reconcile her broken relationship with Carter Walton, trying to understand where it had gone so terribly wrong. The separation had left her hollow, confused, and bitter. Convinced that Carter had betrayed her trust, chosen ambition over affection, and ultimately cast aside what they had tried so hard to nurture. But everything changed the moment she learned the truth. Daphne Rose, a name she had barely noticed in the political maneuverings at Forrester Creations, had not simply been a background player. She had been instrumental in tearing Hope and Carter apart. And even more stunningly, behind Daphne's actions stood Steffi, the sister-in-law who had always masked rivalry beneath a veneer of diplomacy. Hope was blindsided by the revelation, a sickening wave of betrayal sweeping over her as she realized the manipulation she had endured. The woman she had long suspected of wanting control over every aspect of Forrester's legacy had taken that control too far this time, interfering in Hope's heart, meddling in something that had nothing to do with business. It became undeniable. Steffi had orchestrated the break between her and Carter. What once appeared to be Carter's sudden coldness, his shifting priorities, his failure to defend her publicly when her commitment was questioned. It all traced back to a campaign of subtle sabotage. Whispered doubts, planted suspicions, engineered circumstances that pushed Hope and Carter further apart until the fabric of their relationship, already frayed by external pressures, finally snapped. Hope, furious and disillusioned, reeled from the weight of it. Her thoughts raced. What would her life look like if Steffi hadn't gotten involved? Would she and Carter still be together? Would they be building something beautiful now, perhaps even discussing marriage, stability, and family? And more disturbingly, why had Steffi done it? Was it jealousy, corporate greed, or just a perverse pleasure in watching Hope suffer? Meanwhile, Carter had never stopped hoping for a second chance. Even after Hope told him again and again that it was over, that the trust was shattered, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Now he knew he had been right to feel it. Steffi's interference hadn't just cost him a relationship, it had stained his reputation, questioned his integrity, and cast him as a man who chose business over love. When the truth about Daphne's role came to light, Carter felt the full sting of betrayal himself. He had trusted Steffi's leadership, allowed her too much latitude in deciding who held power and influence within Forrester Creations. He had failed to see how those decisions would ripple through his personal life and destroy the one relationship that had felt honest and real in a sea of corporate gamesmanship. Hope, still reeling from the emotional gut punch of Steffi's betrayal, had not yet confronted Carter when Liam Spencer began encouraging her to reconsider everything. Liam, though outwardly calm and supportive, was hiding his own devastating truth. He was dying. The tumor growing inside his brain was aggressive, unrelenting, and slowly stealing the time he had left. He hadn't told Hope. He didn't want her to see him as fragile, as a man already half dead. He still wanted to be her rock, her confidant, her moral compass. But deep down, he knew he couldn't hold onto her, not this time, not like before. Hope's heart had been splintered in too many directions already. She deserved someone who could stay, who could raise her daughter with love and clarity, who could help shoulder the burdens of life and not be a burden himself. And that man, in Liam's mind, was Carter. So Liam did what he thought was right. He urged Hope to reconsider Carter, to give the man another chance, to think not of the betrayal she believed had occurred, but of the possibility that something beautiful could still be salvaged. Hope didn't know what to say. She had been gearing up for something else entirely, an emotional campaign to win Liam back. She had convinced herself that if she could just make him see the depth of her love, he would come back to her. But now, here he was, gently nudging her toward another man, a different life, a future that didn't include him. And the sincerity in Liam's eyes, the quiet resignation, unnerved her. As she struggled with her own conflicted heart, Hope began to see Carter differently. He wasn't the cold opportunist she had imagined. He was a man who had been misled, manipulated, and hurt. And despite everything, he still wanted her, still loved her, still believed that what they had could be real again. And now, with the knowledge of Steffi's interference, something shifted inside Hope. Her anger transformed into something more focused, more purposeful. She had been used, discarded, and painted as someone who had taken advantage of Carter's trust for her own gain. That narrative had been carefully constructed by those around her. It was time to take that narrative back. She confronted Steffi, eyes blazing, voice steady. The denial was immediate, predictably so, but Hope pressed harder. She brought the receipts, emails, recorded conversations, testimony from Daphne Rose herself. And for once, Steffi had no counterattack. She had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. Hope didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply walked away, more determined than ever to take back everything Steffi had tried to strip from her, her reputation, her relationship, her sense of self. She would start by rebuilding what was destroyed, brick by painful brick, beginning with Carter. Carter was stunned when Hope appeared in his office, eyes clear, expression unreadable. She didn't beg or apologize. She simply told him the truth. She knew now what had happened. She knew about Daphne, about Steffi, about everything. And for the first time in a long time, she was willing to stop running. She asked if he still wanted her, still believed in them. Carter, heart pounding, voice cracking, said yes. Of course yes. 1,000 times yes. They didn't fall into each other's arms. Not yet. There was too much pain, too much damage, too much to rebuild. But the foundation was still there. And for both of them, that was enough. News of their reconciliation sent shockwaves through Forrester Creations. Some employees cheered privately, tired of the toxic undercurrents that had festered under Steffi's watch. Others whispered in corners, wondering what this meant for the power dynamics within the company. Steffi herself was livid. She saw Hope's renewed relationship with Carter as a direct attack, a challenge to her authority, her vision, and her grip on the future of the brand. She warned Carter that aligning himself with Hope could cost him everything. Carter didn't flinch. He had already lost too much. Hope and Carter's reunion wasn't about revenge, but Hope couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing Steffi had failed. This time, Hope wasn't the victim. She was the victor. She had exposed the manipulations, reclaimed her truth, and stood beside the man she loved on her own terms. Liam, quietly watching from the sidelines, felt the cold fingers of fate tighten around him. He hadn't told anyone yet, not even Bill, not Steffi, not his doctors, about the most recent scans. But he could feel it in his bones. The tumor wasn't retreating. The treatments weren't working. His time was shrinking, and soon he would have to make the ultimate decision, how he would say goodbye. But for now, he found comfort in one undeniable truth. Hope was finding happiness again. She was letting go of the grief, the bitterness, the cycles that had bound them together for so long. And Carter, honest, steady, loyal Carter, would give her a life she deserved, raise their daughter with respect and consistency, and keep Hope grounded when storms returned. There were still battles to come. Legal disputes, corporate tension, deep scars that wouldn't heal overnight. But Hope was ready. Carter was ready. Together, they were stronger than the chaos around them. And in the center of all that uncertainty, they found something that Steffi could never control. Love that had survived sabotage, betrayal, and heartbreak. The question now wasn't whether Hope and Carter would reunite, they already had. The question was how far they would go to protect what they had rebuilt. Would they confront Steffi publicly, force a reckoning within Forrester, and demand a change in leadership? Would they walk away from the company altogether and build their own brand, free of interference? Or would they stay, rise together through the ranks, and show the world that integrity and love could coexist even in a world as cutthroat as fashion? For now, the answers didn't matter. What mattered was that for the first time in a long time, Hope didn't feel lost. She wasn't waiting to be saved. She was choosing. And she was choosing Carter. Not because Liam wanted her to, not because she wanted revenge. But because when everything else had fallen apart, Carter was the one who stood quietly by, hoping for a second chance. And now she was ready to take it. Together, they would face what came next. And this time, no one, not even Steffi, would stand in their way.